This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Roger McEowen, K-State and Washburn law professor, begins the show as he discusses water right abandonment, tax and estate issues, as well as dual-use equipment, and what often gets overlooked on these topics. K-State Extension agronomist Logan Simon keeps today's show rolling as he previews the 2026 Great Plains Cotton Conference. The show concludes with part of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast as Brad White, Bob Larson, and Todd Gunderson chat about antimicrobial resistance with bovine respiratory disease. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Wednesday show discussing some things farmers don't think about but probably should with K-State and Washburn law professor Roger McEowen. Roger, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Roger, talking through a few different topics today, and first discussing water right abandonment and what is sometimes a concept that gets overlooked.
Well, I think, Shelby, the overlooked concept here, and every state's water law is a little bit different and it's nuanced. So I may talk about kind of Colorado and Nebraska and Kansas real quick. But in this area of the country, water is a legal property right that you can actually lose through non-use for a specific period of time. So farmers, particularly in Colorado and Kansas, are subject to the use it or lose it doctrine. So if you stop using a portion of your water right, maybe due to a shift in crop rotation or conservation efforts, then the state might determine that that right has been abandoned. And that's what you want to be afraid of.
Are there ways they can save themselves from not having it looked abandoned or, per se, losing it?
Yeah, and I think what farmers need to know here that they often overlook is that I think the most immediate difference between the states is how long you can leave your water untouched before the state starts asking you questions. And in Kansas, that's 5 years. So if you had 5 successive years of non-use or 10 in Colorado, then in Kansas, you're going to trigger an automatic deemed abandonment by the state. Now in Colorado, a little bit different. It's just a rebuttable presumption that you've abandoned your water right. Now in Kansas, the burden of proof, once they deem abandonment because you didn't use your water right or a part of it for 5 years in a row, the state's going to have to show non-use, and you have to show due and sufficient cause for your non-use. So maybe the reason is that you've got better irrigation equipment, more efficient irrigation equipment, don't need to use as much water, don't need to use water because it rained a lot, for example, for a number of years in a row. And so you can push back on the state with respect to their claim that you're not using your water right. Now in Colorado, the state's going to put you on an abandonment list and you have to prove that you intended to keep the right. So a little bit different there, but you need to be aware of what could happen to you if you don't use that water right for a long enough period of time.
Do you see producers often having an issue with this?
Oh, it happens. Yeah. This will primarily come to me through the Kansas Ag Mediation Service here at K-State. And we just have to go back through the records. So what have been your water use records? What was the reason why you weren't using as much water? Just to show the state that you had conservation efforts in mind, that you were not abandoning your right. You had a good reason not to use that right. And the same thing would apply if you're in Colorado. You can fight to stay off that list by showing that you didn't actually have intent to abandon. So evidence becomes the key. And in Kansas, the rule is if you have due and sufficient cause, the statute says, for not using your water right, you've got to be able to show the state that, and then you can keep your water right.
Roger, any other important thoughts for producers on this?
Yeah, I would add that if your farm's in an area where the aquifer is closed to new appropriations, which is very common in western Kansas, then the law is more lenient there because the state doesn't want to punish you for saving water in a depleted zone.
And something else producers might want to be keeping in mind, this one involving tax and estate issues and looking at stepped up basis. If people are thinking about gifting things maybe to the next generation or whoever might be taking over the farm, what should maybe they consider besides land?
Well, there are a couple of issues with respect to that. One is to don't overlook your basis issue. Again, I think a revisiting of the basic rules here is always beneficial. basis is the key concept for determining taxable gain, taxable loss, and how you acquire that asset pegs your basis. So if you bought an asset, we're going to start with a purchase price. If you receive the asset by gift, we're going to look at the donor's basis. That's going to carry over into your hands. Or if you're gifting assets to a child, for example, they're going to take your basis in the asset. So that could be pretty low if you've held that asset for quite some time and it's appreciated in value, or you depreciated the asset out. And now you gift that to a child, and maybe there's no basis in that for the child because you wiped out your basis. So understand that. So that's purchase price, that's gift. And of course, the rule is retained with respect to inherited asset, and that is we get a fair market value basis as of date of death. So if I inherit an asset, I'm going to take the value of that asset at the time the individual that died left it to me. What was the value at that time? That's going to be my basis. So that's the key concept we want to start at when we're planning gifts, when we're planning estates, those types of things. And for most people, we want to keep the assets in the estate so that we get a step-up basis. The exclusion is $15 million. That's a green light for us in many situations. It's going to cover the assets in the estate. There's not going to be any federal estate tax. So then we can leave those assets with a step-up basis to the next generation.
If people are wanting to transfer something maybe to that next generation, what is an option for them?
Well, some options with respect to that would be maybe I don't transfer the land. I put that in some sort of entity other than a C Corp. So maybe transfer individual assets, maybe transfer high basis assets if I want to do some gifting during life, and the other low basis assets include in the estate so that they get a new basis at death. So just kind of do it on an asset by asset piece by piece, do it on an asset by asset basis. That might be the best way to do that. So look to see what type of assets you have, what is their tax characteristic, and then make the best choice for you and the next generation, considering where you're at on your income tax basis.
And while we're thinking about estate planning and that next generation, often the subject of fair versus equal comes up, and what has continued to be almost an overlooked issue.
Well, one of the overlooked issues here is just leaving all my land in co-equal shares to my children. So if I have multiple children, let's say I have 4 children, I leave my land in co-equal undivided ownership to the kids so they each have an undivided fourth. Well, yeah, that's okay. That sounds fair, and it sounds equal, but it's not really fair. Because you may have 1 or 2 children that want to stay and continue to farm, but the others don't. And so they view that as a dead asset. They want to get their cash out of that. So what you run up against in that situation is the right of a co-owner to have the property partitioned and sold. And then you split the proceeds. Well, that's a problem for the on-farm heir. They have no legal protection from the off-farm siblings if you do that. So usually the suggestion there is to move the land into an LLC with some strict operating agreement and maybe have good buy-sell provisions in there or long-term payouts so that we address that issue. Basically, what you want to think about is getting dollars into the hands of the off-farm heirs and control in the hands of the on-farm heirs. And there are many better ways to do that rather than just simply leaving the land equally to all your children.
On operations also, sometimes there's equipment that's used for the farming operation, but also for a little bit of recreational fun. And is there an issue sometimes that these operations run into?
That's a sales tax issue in many situations. So I've got, say, an ATV that I buy. I use it 60% for farming. Maybe I'm spraying crops. Maybe I'm checking CRP ground, those types of things. I'm hauling tools around. I use it on the farm. I use it basically as a farm vehicle. Well, I use it 60% of the time on my farm and 40% for recreation or hunting, or when the grandkids come and the grandkids get to use that. Well, that may void your sales tax exemption. You know, a lot of farm equipment purchases for use on the farm are not subject to state sales tax, but state auditors are trained and they're increasingly aggressive about checking for personal use on tax-exempt ag purchases. And what I find here, not only is that point overlooked, but what's also overlooked is that farmers rarely keep a log of equipment use. But I think having a simple logbook showing your ag versus personal use for dual purpose vehicles is essential to defend against an audit from the Kansas Department of Revenue. Those 2 points there are overlooked all the time.
Is there a ratio of which it has to be used for farm use versus personal use?
There's nothing hard and fast in the statute, but what you want on that is your primary use to be in direct production of agricultural commodities. And I'll just leave it at that. And so if that's the case, or that's what you want, the better situation would be, in my ATV example, have two ATVs. Have one that's used for recreation purpose and one that's used for the farm. Then there's no question. Now, you won't get the sales tax exemption, of course, on the one that's not used for farming purposes, but you're going to escape an audit question on that too.
And while we're talking about machinery and equipment on farming operations, are we seeing sometimes a tax trap when it comes to trading in machinery?
We see a big tax trap, and this gets overlooked all the time. Starting in 2018, the tax-free exchange rules under Section 1031 of the tax code no longer apply to personal property. It only applies to real estate. And so the overlooked issue would be, for example, Shelby, if I trade in a $300,000 tractor for a new one, the IRS is going to treat that as a sale of my old tractor and the purchase of a new one. Well, with bonus depreciation now back to 100%, for assets acquired and placed in service on or after January 20 of 2025, there may be no basis in that old tractor. Or if I took a lot of Section 179 on it, I've wiped out the basis. So that sale triggers depreciation recapture, and that's all taxed at ordinary income. And even if I sell it on the installment basis, that recapture occurs all in year one, and I may not have any payments coming in to offset that increased tax liability. That is a major trap that's out there, often overlooked.
Roger, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thanks, Shelby. Appreciate it.
That was K-State and Washburn law professor Roger McEowen. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show talking about the upcoming 2026 Great Plains Cotton Conference with K-State Extension agronomist Logan Simon. Logan, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on, Shelby.
Logan, what is the 2026 Great Plains Cotton Conference?
Yes, so the Great Plains Cotton Conference, we are in our 7th year. This is a collaborative conference brought to you by Kansas State University, Oklahoma State University, the Kansas Cotton Association, and Cotton Incorporated. What we're really trying to do is bring a comprehensive cotton-focused program to our producers and our agronomists that are involved in the cotton industry here in southern Kansas as well as northern Oklahoma. This conference is an excellent opportunity for folks that are deeply involved in the industry, or for folks that are just considering what cotton could bring to their operation. This is a meeting that has something for people at all levels.
And this is taking place February 19th in Pratt, Kansas. And when you look at the agenda, quite an extensive list of people to talk on cotton.
Really, truly, yes. So we've got some fantastic speakers lined up for this meeting. Some of them are going to be familiar faces for folks that may have attended this meeting in the past. We'll hear from Taz Smith with the National Cotton Council with his annual update on policy. John Wendura from USDA ARS talking on the harvest practices to maximize that value of our cotton. And then Bailey Tolman from StoneX talking on cotton marketing opportunities and risks to get our day off to the races. From there, we've got a whole suite of speakers from across both the KSU and Oklahoma State University systems, from everything from fertility with Brian Arnall from Oklahoma State to weed management with Sarah Lancaster, a familiar face for our Kansas folks, and just all things in between.
Lunch is also going to be provided, and what will people have the opportunity to do during that time?
Absolutely. So during lunch, which is sponsored by Phytogen, always appreciative for their continued sponsorship of the Great Plains Cotton Conference. And at that time, you'll have some opportunity to walk around and visit with some of our sponsors at their various booths. We've got a whole suite of sponsors that we are very much appreciative of. Just a few examples of folks that you'll have some opportunity to speak with. Obviously, our ginning operators, Southern Kansas cotton growers, Northwest cotton growers, and Next Generation. our local Pratt Cotton Gin, folks from Heartland Soil Services, Plains Cotton Cooperative Association, PCCA, as well as folks from Tama USA, Teva Corporation, Thrive Ag, AgLogic, just a whole suite of things. So a real array of folks to spend that time with visiting.
And Logan, after lunch, what's on the agenda?
Yeah, as we move into our time after lunch, we'll be hearing from Jenny Dudak from Oklahoma State talking on the results of her 2025 variety trials across the state of Oklahoma. I'll be presenting on some of the work that we've been doing in Kansas around variety, seeding rate, planting date, and irrigation timing trials. So a whole suite of things there. We'll have an insect update from Ashley Ferris from Oklahoma State University, and this is going to be especially important for our cotton growers because we'll also be talking about a new insect to the cotton belt, which is the cotton jacid. This is a pest that has not made it to Oklahoma and Kansas yet, knock on wood, but was a big problem for folks in Georgia, South Carolina, and Alabama. So Ashley's going to be summarizing everything we've learned so far, especially trying to get our folks in the right spot for scouting as we enter this 2026 season. Again, was not found in Kansas or Oklahoma in 2025, but we'll be highlighting that. And we'll wrap up at the end with I'm very excited for this, a panel discussion on the use of UAV technologies in cotton production. We're going to be hearing from Deepak Joshi, who is our newest precision ag specialist in extension at Kansas State University. And we'll be tying him together with a local commercial drone applicator and a producer there in central Kansas who can talk about the role that UAV technologies, drone technologies have played for them within cotton production. So really exciting for that. The plan is to adjourn right about 4:45 there in the afternoon. Very all-encompassing day.
And you mentioned talking about your trials, and what are some key points you have seen from that work you did?
Absolutely, yeah. So some of the information that we'll be sharing is basically trying to see how does production of cotton in Kansas differ from other regions, as we've been really basing a lot of this off of lessons that have been learned in our states to the south, but at our latitude, do we anticipate that those will hold? Some key highlights is really probably on the variety side, demonstration of greater flexibility when it comes to variety selection. Similar with seeding rate. However, ours is an environment where in this day and age of a push for lowering our seeding rates to save on cost, we may not always be setting ourselves up in the best way here at this latitude where our seasons it looks very different from other areas. Early planting is always the name of the game. I don't think anybody's going to be surprised by that. And then some interesting findings on some flexibility with irrigation timing. So we'll dive more into the details at the meeting, but those are some high level findings we've had there.
Who do you recommend take the time to attend this conference?
Everybody that has any interest in cotton production in Kansas and Oklahoma is going to get something out of this conference. This conference is going to bring valuable information to folks that have a long history of cotton production, all the way up to those that are just starting to think about what it may play on their operation. So highly recommend producers. This is a great opportunity for agronomists, as well as insurance agents, bankers, anybody that might have interest in what cotton brings to the agricultural landscape of our region. There's something for you at the Great Plains Cotton Conference.
And as mentioned, this is taking place February 19th. But the day before, is there something else that people, if they want to come do a little socializing, could attend?
Absolutely. As is our tradition, we begin the Great Plains Cotton Conference with a welcome reception the night before. So on February 18th, we will be meeting at Club Diest at 5:30 p.m. That is at 202 South Main in Pratt. It is a great opportunity for some fine fellowship. The cotton industry is a very friendly bunch. If you are thinking about coming to this program, please plan to join us for this social. It is one of the highlights of the Great Plains Cotton Conference.
And where is the conference taking place then the next day?
This is held at the K-State Pratt County 4-H building. That is at 81 Lake Road there in Pratt, Kansas. We have an excellent venue there. Always appreciative of the opportunity to utilize that space with Pratt County.
Do people need to register for this event?
We do not require any pre-registration. Registration is exclusively at the door. We begin at 7:30 a.m. for registration, with the program beginning at 8:15. There's also no cost to attend. We will provide a wonderful meal for everyone and other refreshments throughout the day. No cost to attend. Open to all.
If people are wanting to find more information or maybe review the agenda for themselves, how can they do that?
Absolutely. So a couple of pathways that you can utilize. We do have an agronomy in the Agronomy e-update, an article that has gone out with more information on this program. And then they can also reach out to me with any questions, or your local extension office to reach me. You can catch me at by email at lsimon@ksu.edu. And would be able to answer any and all questions.
And as we've been talking about this conference, also just want to make a mention of one that's taking place February 10th through 12th. However, this one taking place in Texas. And what is this conference?
Yeah, so another conference that we've got some ties to with K-State Extension is what we call the Southwest Cotton Physiology Conference. This is, as you say, happening on February 10th through the 12th in Lubbock, Texas. It is another all-encompassing cotton agronomy meeting. It is a excellent, don't let the name deceive you. That term physiology sometimes scares people off. This is a very practical agronomic conference that for those that are able to join us in Lubbock, this is an excellent opportunity to hear from specialists all over the states of Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, and beyond, and just really an excellent opportunity for agronomists, for anybody engaged in cotton production. If you're able to join us, come and be with us in the world's largest cotton patch, Lubbock, Texas.
Logan, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you for having me on, Shelby.
That was K-State Extension agronomist Logan Simon as he discussed the upcoming Great Plains Cotton Conference, which is taking place February 19th in Pratt, Kansas. Logan did also mention the Southwest Cotton Physiology Conference, which is taking place in Lubbock, Texas, February 10th through the 12th. If you have more questions, I will link the e-update article that has more information about the Cotton Conference, as well as Logan's email address, which is lsimon@ksu.edu. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Wednesday show with part of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast with Brad White, Bob Larson, and Todd Gunderson.
This is a agree or disagree statement. The statement is many cases of BRD that are treated and die, antimicrobial resistance has played a role in their death.
I would disagree with that, personally. I'm not saying never, but I've seen enough lungs when we necropsy calves that have died of pneumonia to recognize that there's a lot of things going on. There's the animal's response. There's the length of the disease before it's first treated, all those types of things that matter. So antimicrobial choice, antimicrobial timing is important, but antimicrobial resistance as a cause of treatment failure is probably not first on my list when an animal dies of respiratory disease.
I want to be careful when I say this. I think antimicrobial resistance is a problem in general. I think that we need to be cognizant of antimicrobial resistance, but I disagree with the notion that a lot of our treatment failures currently in the cattle industry are due to antimicrobial resistance. And the reason that I have, it's slightly different from Bob's, is I don't think that respiratory disease in cattle is a bug problem. There are pathogens that are involved in respiratory disease, but I don't think you could say there is one particular pathogen, one particular bacteria or species of bacteria that is creating this problem, and that's why we have so many cattle getting sick. If it were the case that it was one particular bacteria, and if that bacteria was the major determinant of disease, and if that bacteria were developing resistance to all of our therapeutics, then I would be more concerned about antimicrobial resistance with regards to our ability to treat disease. But that's not the case. There are so many other factors that influence the severity of disease, whether an animal gets disease, whether they recover from the disease, that have very little to do with the actual pathogen factors. So while antimicrobial resistance is something I think we should take very seriously, I think it is something that we should be cognizant of, I don't think that is the major reason that we have treatment failures in the cattle industry for respiratory disease.
And I'm going to agree with you guys on this one, and I'm going to use a little bit different logic of we find it, right? We will find, if we treat animals with antimicrobials, you will find antimicrobial resistance. It's a matter of degrees, but finding it does not mean that was the causative factor in the death of the calf. And as you said, there are multiple pathogens, multiple areas. So prevention and diagnosis, and Bob, you alluded to this in saying it's not just the pathogen, it is the calf's response to that pathogen. What is the animal doing? What's the environment that they're in? Are they in a suitable environment that promotes recovery? So I think prevention, ideal. Diagnosis is our next step, and we talked about that a little bit at the top of when do you diagnose them in that process, because that makes a difference in treatment response as well.
Okay, but I'm going to be careful, particularly for respiratory disease in cattle, because it's a syndrome, and a syndrome is different than, we talk about diseases in humans or animals that are a specific, so rabies. One germ causes one disease. Well, respiratory disease is a syndrome. A number of viruses, a number of bacteria, and certainly a number of animal factors are involved. Syndromes are a lot more complicated. And so when you say diagnose the problem, I'm not thinking diagnose the pathogen that's currently today causing the problem, because there was another pathogen that set them up yesterday. There was immune function differences. There was environmental stresses. So when I say diagnose the problem, it's diagnose what's in the environment that's not ideal, what is about the calf that's not ideal, and what's different about the pathogens in that animal. So don't think diagnosis means germs.
Good clarification, because you're thinking the same way I am. You knew. I'm thinking diagnosis of they diagnosed with the syndrome, not necessarily a specific pathogen. And I would agree with you guys that I think we do see, Todd made a great point, antimicrobial resistance, important. We should be aware of it, but it shouldn't necessarily be deemed as the cause of all our death or our treatment failures. It's easy to put the finger there, but I think figuring out how do we do better at other aspects of preventing, having fewer cases, doing some of those other things.
Once again, that was part of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow.